Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Liberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to this week's episode of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. This is Melisa Liberman, and today I'm excited to introduce you to my client and friend, Claire Elvers. She is a fellow independent consultant. She is a brand strategist and works in innovation with her corporate clients. And I'm so excited to have her on the podcast. We just talked about her experience of having a corporate retreat for her business, which is her business of one, and all of the lessons learned that she has from that experience, why she did it, how she made the most of it, what she walked away from, and her advice on how you can leverage and in corporate retreat for yourself to really zoom back out and look at your business in a different way and set yourself up for success. So I'm excited for you to hear her insights and perspective and advice on the concept of hosting a corporate retreat. We referenced a checklist that in the episode, I wrote it as a compliment to episode 90, which is the corporate retreat for the independent consultant. And you can go download the retreat checklist that Claire leveraged and that so many other listeners and clients have leveraged as well. You can find that on my website at melisaliberman.com/retreat checklist. So that is how you find it that we referenced. But more importantly, I am excited for you to hear this full episode because not only does Claire share her insights on having a corporate retreat for a business of one, but she also shares her insights on her insights from the perspective of being a brand strategist. And so we talked through that. We also talked about the importance of focusing on the mid funnel. So listen all the way to the end. There's some really important things about how to increase the size and effectiveness of your mid funnel, mid pipeline strategies, and also what she shares as one of the most important factors that she's learned in terms of being successful as an independent consultant. So we covered a lot of ground, and I'm excited for you to hear from Claire and her insights and perspectives. So without further ado, we'll dive in. Today on the podcast, I'm so excited to welcome Claire Elvers, one of my clients and an amazing independent consultant who's been so successful in launching her business and growing it over the last couple of years, year and a half, maybe, Claire. So I'm excited to talk with her today. We were connecting a few months ago, and she was telling me that she was planning a corporate retreat, her own corporate retreat. And so I wanted to have her on the podcast to talk about what the result of that was and get her tips and insights for you to hear. So excited to have you here, Claire. Do you want to start off by introducing yourself?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. It's great to see you again. I am an independent consultant focusing on strategy and innovation for consumer brands. I also coach and run training workshops on strategic thinking and decision making.
Amazing. And tell us a little bit about on a personal side, Claire, where do you live and a little bit about your life in general.
Yeah, I'm in Wellesley, Massachusetts, so greater Boston. And I've got a husband and two kids, two tween girls. One's 12 in seventh grade, the other one's in fifth grade. And when I am not doing my consulting work or running my business, I am running around with them.
Yeah.
Lots of driving to activities, lots of time spent in the car, having conversations with them, and then also just being part of their lives.
That's amazing. Tell us a little bit about how did you become an independent consultant?
It was not linear. I've spent similar to a number of, your guests and clients. I've spent a number of years in corporate, over 20 years. And I stepped away a couple of years ago and actually not really thinking about independent consulting at all when I stepped away. At that point, it was really more of an exploratory of either entrepreneurship through acquisition or franchising. I knew I wanted to have something of my own. I knew that I wanted to be able to kind of take control of my own day and my destiny. And then really when I learned that it would take some time to find the right business. I determined that I needed to fill my time with something. And so consulting was something that was always in the back of my head. I've worked with independent consultants and had a lot of success in partnering with them. And I figured this was something that I could at least try. And literally, it just was a girlfriend of mine had some work that she wasn't able to take on, and she passed it my way, and off I went. And I think I realized both through that project and then honestly, just as work started coming through, as I put my name out there and said, "Hey, I'm doing this now," I started to realize I really loved two things. One, I do like a lot of variety in my work. And this gives me the chance to sort of scratch that itch. I love working with different teams, different businesses, different industries. And specific to running my own business and what I was looking for, when I initially left corporate, it's it. For me to be able to have that sweet spot between running my own business, having greater flexibility and control over my day, and really, frankly, this was the fastest way to start my own business.
Mm.
Light. It's just me. It, allows me to productize and monetize my experience and insights. And so I found that it was a really good fit for what I was looking to do and the lifestyle I wanted to lead.
I think so many of us fall into this kind of from an accidental perspective, but there's so many benefits, obviously, from a financial perspective and flexibility perspective. And like you were saying, the fulfillment, the variety, and being able to pick and choose what clients to work with. So glad that your friend had some extra work that led you to this path. Tell us a little bit about what are you focused on for this year? What are your goals for 2025?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. It's one, marketing, and two, productization. And I'll kind of break those down separately. On the marketing front, maybe stepping back a little bit, I happen to be getting the majority of my work through direct leads network, maybe a warm referral here or there. And I started to realize there actually comes a point where solely relying on your network becomes very unpredictable. And actually, the act of like one on one calling, reconnect meetings, while all very important and part of my day to day, by itself becomes unscalable and inefficient. And really, I had an aha just, over the course of the last few months where I think that marketing lens and dialing that in was going to be very important for me to continue to build sort of a sustainable business. And for me, that's brand marketing specifically around that mid funnel. So, content, trust building, how do you actually start to nurture? And really, the purpose for me was one, certainly to put my name out there and say, hey, this is what I'm known for. But a lot of this also is just staying top of mind with folks in between the connects. And so, recognizing that that was going to be an important activity that I needed to make room for. So that's one area. The other area is productization. So I mentioned earlier, I am also doing some training and coaching around strategic thinking, and really strategic thinking targeted at that sort of middle manager, sort of newer, earlier in career, starting to scale set. And I had came upon this through a recent consulting client who actually had this need, realized that this was probably a need that a lot of companies had, and felt that there was a product or a program there that I could actually dig into. And so for me, it's now continuing to evolve and prototype the offering in a few different ways, and thinking about this as a fixture as part of my business, in addition to the consulting that I'm doing directly with clients.
I think it's so exciting. You've just been following these breadcrumbs in some ways, finding the type of client work you love doing, and this opportunity that presented itself in the sense of this. Not only is this engagement helpful for a client, but also can be productized for others to use as well, and to add that to your arsenal, I guess, of tools that you can leverage with clients, and to make your business more scalable as well.
Well, and I mean, I think the way that I've been thinking about this and had started to map this is they really do reinforce one another. One is very much about the actual work that I'm doing from a strategy and innovation perspective with my clients, working side by side with them. I'm extracting learnings and insights off of that, which then starts to feed, the way that I think and how I might actually train this in the future, which then in turn also helps to feed how I continue to present myself and how I continue to bring value. And so I think there's an interesting flywheel that I want to try to get going over the next bit of time. And so that's really the work that I'm doing over the next year or so.
Let's talk about the retreat. So I assume some of this focus came from your retreat. So maybe take us back and give us the basics of how this retreat came to be and what was it about, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, brass tacks. I knew that I needed to take some dedicated time away from my desk to actually think through this. And I needed to like physically remove myself. And I'm opportunistic at best. I happen to be going to Vegas for a girls' weekend, and I tacked on some time in the beginning of that to do this. And so the retreat, it was me, myself, and I at my own offsite is maybe the way that I would describe it. And I tackled it. And actually, this was following some of your guidance too, and some of the materials that you had in the way that I would have tackled this corporate offsite or a team meeting with my own direct teams back in corporate. There's prep work and inputs that I had. I mapped out the agenda and I had really set aside time to think through how I actually tackle the day, especially since it was just me. On the prep work, it was really, and maybe I should also take a step back and say, the questions that I was looking to answer for myself was getting sharper on my why, my value proposition. And I think the one area that I should also mention is that mostly, I've talked about this. I mean, I'm a generalist and I do a lot of different things. And I think early days, in your consultancy, and particularly for me, for my first year, I was having a hard time trying to, get to what my son actually was going to be. And I vacillating between, well, it's marketing or it's brand marketing or it's strategy or it's innovation. And so I wanted to set aside some time to really dig into where I wanted to actually focus, where I felt like I would be, the most successful because it was the work that I wanted to be doing that I was energized by and where I felt like I saw the greatest need and where I could contribute the most. And so that's really the point. That was really the point in terms of the thinking time for me. So, the prep work leading into it was a financial recap, my 2024 sort of wins and misses, so to speak. I do have a strategy process that I do train on. So, really doing the pre work on that actual strategy process, which is a very simple sort of where to play, how to win framework, just kind of skimmed a little bit for the purposes of, my work and what my business was going to be. And then, really, the agenda setting was to review that with fresh eyes. And then, really, instead of discussion time, set aside writing time. And so just, time boxing it to the extent that I could at least start to articulate sort of what I was seeing and just some of the patterns that I was seeing in the work that I was doing and where I got the most joy, and really get much clearer on my why. And, my personal why as to, what we had discussed about being an independent consultant, why there was very clear, but I couldn't necessarily tie that to my business why, specific to sort of where what I wanted to help, why that was so, I felt like that was so important. And so that was a lot of the focus. I did everything that I could to keep the agenda very tight. It's funny, I was just mentioning to you earlier and looking at the agenda, I was like, oh, yeah, there's a lot of intention here. But I actually think really zeroing in there, I had a whole bunch of other things I wanted to get to, I didn't get to, was actually critically important, with the outcome then being some of this focus now in terms of where I'm headed from a consultancy. Maybe the other thing that I'd add too is I did, in the spirit of a retreat and an offsite, wanted to keep some time for just inspiration and going, et cetera. And this is where being in a town like Las Vegas is great. And for me, I'm super weird in that I really I love shopping. I love walking stores and actually being part of and engaging in different, retail experiences opened up a lot of the creativity. And again, just helped me start to understand what were the things that I was most excited about in terms of the consulting work that I wanted to be focused on. And so, coming out of it, I have my notes off of my discussions and, I've been, since iterating on that VP and sort of where I'm headed as a whole.
Tell us a little bit about, let's go down the path for a minute about the why. So tell us more about why that why, your personal why, like you said, it feels very clear. Tell us more about what the value in your business has been of clarifying what the why is on the business side.
Yeah. I mean, I think the ties back to what I was saying before of, there's a bunch of different things. And I think a lot of consultants that have been, successful in corporate feel this way. You can do a lot and you do a lot because you're excited by a host of different things and you have a lot of all these different experiences. But it is a real exercise in thinking through what actually fills your cup from a business and career perspective. And for me, where I zeroed in on was the customer experience and customer experience innovation is, what lights me up personally. And I think to be able to do work in that space and to be able to focus there was something that I don't think I had really appreciated, especially since I've had a bunch of different types of roles, corporate roles, since doing some of that work. And so that was one piece of it that I knew that I wanted to get to. And I think what I had also realized was I get excited about the stickiness and the challenge and the strategic trade offs that you need to make as you're trying to create something, build something. And so I knew that was the space that I wanted to continue to play in. So that was one thing. I think the other thing was, and I think probably like many of your clients and your listeners, there's always the question of like, are there things about corporate that I miss? I can definitely tell you there's a lot about corporate I don't miss. But that it's still recent, and the thought always crosses my mind. And I think the one thing that I kept on gravitating towards was I miss the coaching and development. It's lonely. I'm on my own, and I've got mentors and here and there, and I do a lot of direct peer mentorship, but I think being able to watch people grow, build skills is something that I had a lot of joy in that I was missing. And so I think that's part of the reason why when I had gotten that project to, start to build a strategic thinking framework that people could be trained on, I was like, that's something that's super exciting and that totally lights me up. And all of a sudden it just became really clear that that was an area that I wanted to really focus on. And then maybe even taking it a step further, I think I found that in that space, it's a very common opportunity area. When you're told that you have room to grow there, it can be paralyzing. And I want to help. I knew that I've been successful in getting people over the hump, and that was something that I wanted to continue to help with. And then finally recognizing that there's so many benefits around building that skill set that extend beyond business as well. And so I knew that there was something there that I wanted to continue to focus on and therefore ultimately productize. So, that became a very clear sort of North Star for the business that I'm trying to build now.
I think I've shared this story with you before, but it reminds me of early in my career when the CEO told me, you're really good at operation. It was at the startup. You're really good at operationalizing. We need you to be more strategic. What do you do with that? you know, Sometimes it almost feels as though that's something you're born with genetically. You're either strategic or you're tactical. And so to me, as you and I've talked about this over the months and having this particular offering to help the strategic thinking training, as you call it, really is so valuable to your point about doing the work that impacts the clients, but also offering something that then helps your profession grow, the industry grow, your specific niche, and the people that are doing the type of work that you do to be more successful is such a powerful combination.
Yeah. I mean, I think if there's, again, and this is the beautiful thing of having that time to sit and think about this.
Yeah.
And it's funny, again, I was re-reviewing some of my notes coming out of it. And I can't believe how easily it crystallized once I had some time to just devote to it and actually look inward and be really honest with myself in terms of where I wanted to be. And I think the practice of actually applying this even to my own business suggests to me that this is something that others can do and, in this kind of their own businesses as well. And so it becomes my hope long term is that this just becomes a practice for people to just apply and work within. So like I said, I can't, for me, the corporate retreat was it was pretty straightforward and very simple. I took a day and a half to just kind of map some, just get some good quality thinking time around it. But I think so much of it was also just giving myself the permission to take that time and have it be about my company and me, which I think is something that we don't often let ourselves do.
What will it look like going forward, Claire? How will you integrate this as a process? Is it an annual thing, a quarterly thing? What do you think is most effective for you and your
Yeah,
business?
I do think that there's an annual thing. I think where it is that just take that time away. I like the idea of check-ins, and so that's where. And I'm trying to not put so much because there is some prep associated with pulling something like this together, and I think tying it actually to almost like a year-end review is perfect. And so I sort of like the idea of instituting that. But I am now working through a quarterly formula where, because again, everything's now documented. I can easily go back and look and see what I agree with or disagree with, and then have this be part of my, planning, routine planning ongoing as well. But I think the other thing that I've been toying with, and I haven't quite gotten there yet, but I didn't mind the writing and I didn't mind the talking to myself. On the other hand, I kind of wish I had a person with me. And so I don't know if next year's the time or if there's a future state, but part of me is like, gosh, what if I found another like independent consultant friend to do this with, which I think, whether it's virtually, on our respective own corporate retreats or doing something
Yeah.
together is something that's also crossed my mind.
Yeah. Having that ability to bounce what you're thinking off of someone else what kind of person do you think that would be? Would they be in your same industry, or would it be just someone you have a relationship with, a pre-existing relationship with?
Yeah,
Have you thought about that?
I don't think it necessarily has to, it definitely doesn't have to be somebody that's in the same industry or same line of work. I think it absolutely could be somebody that's just sort of net new. I mean, obviously, there is then the pre work to sort of make one another aware of sort of business challenges and what you're thinking through. But I think it's more the mindset of, hey, this is something that's actually really important for my business. I could use a peer to bounce things off of. Here are the hairy questions, and almost have somebody mirror back. And I actually also think hearing other people talk about their challenges as well also lights up a bunch of dot connects in your own brain too, which is why I think it's equally beneficial just to get their perspective and what they're working through.
As you think about what advice you might give to other consultants when they're thinking about formulating their own corporate retreat process, what would you recommend?
I think the pre work is important. It doesn't have to be heavy. I mean, for me, it was just shaking my like, and I have an ongoing like monthly hits and misses, not misses, but like just, things, just key learning type thing. And so taking that and just trying to pattern match and see some themes within that, using that as my jumping off point. The agenda, I mean, it goes without saying, is key. And I'm a fan of have two or three topics that you do want to get into and know that you'll probably get through like one, maybe two. And that's okay. Because I think your mind, giving yourself permission and your brain to just go in a few different directions and not time boxing too much to the extent that, time box the writing, but don't time box the thinking, right? And allowing yourself the time to do that, even if it means that you don't get to, I did not get to all three topics that I had laid out. I had the best of intentions of saying, okay, well, what are the gaps and the capabilities that I want to fill? And what are the things that I want to try to get to? I did that after and it was fine. But I
Yeah.
think, if you're going to take the time, just go really deep in, one or two areas and, feel satisfied with, where you're headed coming off of that.
I love the way you frame this, which is what are the big questions that I want to answer, and having that thinking time versus I've done some of these in the past. I try to do one a quarter. I like going, somewhere bigger once a year. And there's a few local hotels that I like going to that are easy, that if it just makes it so much easier just to be able to drive 10 minutes and be at the retreat sometimes. Luckily, I live in a very beautiful place that is lots of good spots to go to. So do you. But, as you think about, sometimes it can become so overwrought with a to-do list, or oh, these are the things I could hammer out if I'm not distracted, when in fact the key that I've been hearing you focus in on is the thinking, the space to think.
And I think maybe the other thing that I'd also say too is there's the space to think, and then there's the time to codify. And I mean, I think that's where, and it's sort of the same thing with regular corporate retreats, right? Oftentimes discussions have to go somewhere. There's stuff that has to be unpacked and worked through. The way that I see it when I facilitate
Yeah.
these is this is the first time people are having these deeper conversations in quite some time and not getting so mired in their day to day or their team's day to day. And so leaving room for that discussion to happen, but then also making sure that there's a moment to codify the themes or the key takeaways, also I think becomes really important because, for me, that's what I continue to refer back to as I continue to get new information and new data as I'm, going through my day to day.
Tell us, Claire, as you think about the bit bigger picture, I would love to talk a little bit about your journey and what you've learned so far. Tell us exactly how long have you been in business?
It's about 18 months.
18 months.
Proper. Once I held and decided to hold for the moment on the ETA and the franchising sort of exploration. Those are dreams that we'll still pick up and actually we still think about as well, which again is the beauty of this line of work, where you do become a paraprofessional. And I think building, for me, the importance was to be able to build a practice that not only allowed me to take control over my day to drive my children around, but also to actually explore other business opportunities or, income opportunities as well in parallel. And so, I mean, I think that's for me, the biggest thing is how getting the right frame in mind around how do I want to actually be this paraprofessional, knowing that independent consulting will be an anchor for it, and putting the right sort of systems in place that I feel like I can get there. I think big picture ongoing, this is something I think because I love the sort of the intellectual fuel that it gives me, that in and of itself is the drive for me to continue with this as a key part of sort of my business. I think the other piece of this too is I see a path where this is it. This is something that I can certainly focus on and create a really fulfilling business around as well. And so it has only been 18 months, but it already feels like it's been years. But I think the great thing is you learn so much about just business ownership through the work that you do. And I think that's really what has continued to again, it's satisfying that intellectual curiosity where at times I feel like I'm even my own client, which has gotten me pretty motivated to continue this work.
What has been the most surprising thing to you that you've uncovered or learned in the last 18 months?
I think it comes back to what I was saying before around the niching down doesn't necessarily mean that you're removing yourself from opportunities. I think that's the piece that I think I'd always been so nervous about. And I think if anything, it actually brings you more opportunity and sort of opens you up in a lot of different directions. So I think that was one thing that I was surprised by how much more effective and impactful I am with that as an approach. Maybe the other thing that I would say that was surprising is I think I've always prided myself in saying and believing that if you focus on your controllables, it all works. And it does. But I don't think I really appreciated what that would actually mean in practice when it's my own business.
Mm.
And so I think that's something that, I would say more than anything else has been one of the biggest learnings in what that actually means in practice and, staying focused on the things that are within your control and that you can kind of push forward. And it's a lesson that I think is easier preached than sometimes practiced. But it's an area that I don't think I really appreciated how important that would be in this type of work.
Tell us an example. What's when you think about that?
Well, I mean, actually, this is something that you and I had exchanged an email over, Melissa. I mean, when I think there was a moment earlier this year, and I think this was post corporate retreat, and it was a tough time when you're getting a bunch of different sort of no's or no, not right nows. I had five of those in like 1 week. And so it was, it's a tough moment. And I think for the first time, I felt like I wasn't in control of what I was trying to do. And I think you actually had a newsletter or it might have been a podcast, but there was a really great and sort of tough love advice that you had. And I actually, I did write it down. It was, you get to a place where you have a victim mentality and there's a bit of success entitlement. And I actually think looking in the mirror and noting that, and the best antidote to getting off of that is one, the realization, and two, actually getting to, okay, picking yourself up and say, what can I control? What can I actually be doing? What does this mean in terms of how I need to pivot the way that I'm going to market? What does this mean in terms of sort of the anchors that I put down as it relates to, the marketing levers that I want to start to pull? And all of a sudden you're acting and you're moving and you're moving forward. And I think that becomes really motivating to kind of continue to pull you through some of those tough moments.
Yeah, I find too that reminding that getting back into an abundant mindset, five no's in a row can be very tough. But remembering we're not looking for thousands of or even hundreds of clients in this business model. We're looking for those ideal clients that have fulfilling work that we want to be doing, and kind of remembering that piece of it too can be really, really at least to get you to open the notebook again, or open your computer,
Well, and the thing is, what I've also realized too is that the no's are also data. They're little sparks of insight as well in terms of what you could potentially. I mean, sometimes a no is a no just because like the business priorities has changed and that sort of is what it is. But there's tweaks that you can be making. I look at sort of how there's a danger of over ruminating on this, I realize.
Mm.
But I do think just taking a minute to say, okay, well, what did I learn? What worked well in this instance and what didn't? And to be able to then also take that, for me personally as data to say, you know what, as I think of my funnel, here's what this means, for the whatever, this period of time, the five no's, got me to one yes. And that's a client that I'm working with right now, right? So I think it's just continuing to think through and just know that this is part of the process. But again, taking it for what it is, which is just insight and data, or data really in the moment that you can turn into insight, and then just acting and kind of continuing to push forward.
One thing you said that I just want to highlight for a moment for all of the listeners who are not in marketing, which is you are a marketing and brand strategist. This is your expertise, and you still have had some resistance to niching and being
Uh,
and specializing. So I think if you can have that resistance, it's such a good, just such a good thing to highlight for everyone else who is such a common challenge that we worry that we're going to leave money on the table, or leave amazing projects on the table. And I just want to highlight that, because if you're having that challenge, all of us do in some form or fashion, and it's okay, and it's also beneficial to move past it and plant a flag, at least from the outside's viewpoint.
I think it's pretty critical. I don't know. I mean, I should have known this. I really should have, I mean, this is exactly the advice that I give to my clients as they're thinking through, their own business strategy and getting focused and getting tight. But I know why it's hard to do, especially when you're new, because I think a couple things. One, you're still learning your way around, I think twofold. One, what you're good at in this context or what you're comfortable doing, but really more importantly, what you really enjoy doing. And you kind of have to shed sort of whatever your last job was, or your last few jobs were, to do that. And I think it's easy to sort of get stuck in this sort of generalist space. But I think the planting the flag, it's just putting out there what you want, what you want to be known for. It doesn't negate any of the experiences or any, frankly, other expertise that you may have built. I think you actually also coined this term, what stuck with me, Melissa, was this idea of a secret menu. Whatever, if you want to go do some, if I wanted to go do some sort of like, I don't know, brand start, brand building, marketing, brand marketing project, it's on my secret menu. It's sort of out there. But as far as what is the work that consistently lights me up, that I don't get tired of, that I get really energized by, it really is the strategy and innovation work. And I think, why not lean in?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about this at the beginning, so hopefully it's okay for me to ask you. You decided to hire a coach early in your evolution of your business when you first started. Can you give us a little bit of insight about why you did that and what your experience was?
Yeah. I mean, gosh, I think I probably did what a lot of your listeners do, was just start surfing content and just stumble upon your podcast. For me, well, I guess first thing I would say, I set out to hire you, not necessarily a business coach. I don't, I mean, I think it was something about, I think one, the very sort of pragmatic and approach that you were taking. Two, for me personally, there were some things that I knew that I could like do better, and a lot of it was around operationalization on some of these things that I just knew that I needed a little bit more guidance and expertise around, and an accountability partner along the way. And we're not working as directly right now, but you're still my accountability partner. I still hear you in my head. And I think having that early, I think really does set you up for success. And sort of, for me personally, it felt like it was an investment in me and my business that I knew I needed to lean in to sort of accelerate the path that I knew I wanted to be on. And I think I wanted somebody who I knew would get me to the right set of processes, but also help be that sounding board in some, the sticky moments that every independent consultant runs into, especially early on when you don't have as many reps to sort of know your way out of, situations. And so to me, it just made good business sense. It was the right investment.
Well, I'm so glad you found me through this podcast. What a fun full
Oh my
circle
gosh.
moment.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I just realized that. Yeah, I mean, and I think, you hire a coach when you feel like you're ready and you're ready. And maybe that's the other thing that I would say. I was in the headspace where I was ready, because there's some self reflection, there's homework that's associated with it. And you need to be able to actually clear time and dedicate the time to do that work. And so, I was at in sort of inflection, sort of within projects. I knew that I had a stretch of time that I could actually devote to this. So, from a timing perspective, it made a lot of sense at that point as well.
Yeah. I guess in a way, it's like a little mini retreats every week
Yes.
of, you know?
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. And especially, I think, again, you do, by having a sounding board there, it is the accountability partner that you have, and somebody who knows what you're going through because they've been there, but also understands your business in a way because you've opened up and you've shared that. And so I think can both mirror and then also reflect new and different perspective as well.
Claire, tell us when you think about running the consulting business and the lessons you've learned so far, and there's new lessons every day. I think that's part of the value of running this type of business. But tell us what advice you might give to other consultants.
Yeah. I think coming back to your why, it is everything in terms of what actually motivates you to push through hard times, lights you up in the moments that you're having great success. I think as I said, there's the personal why in terms of the flexibility and the control and the variety. But then also you get to do the type of work and work with the type of people that you want to work with. It's great. There's so much of that. And I think having that as a North Star for what you're doing it's pretty powerful and it's really motivating. So I would definitely say that sort of why component. And, I think it shouldn't change. It probably won't change. Maybe the one thing I will say is that there may be different conditions that are sort of going on in your life that may sort of make you think differently about it. But I think just making sure that you have a moment to continue to reflect on that why becomes pretty important.
Yeah, I think that's such a key here because sometimes we think, well, already invested this much time in this focus or that focus, and but this is such a evolving type of business model that you could change your mind really whenever you want. You could change what you want to be sought after for, or what your ideal client looks like, based on where you're at, both personally and professionally.
I mean, I think that's just it. It's your business.
Yeah,
You can do whatever you want, and I
that's
think
right.
you're the ones that are, that's setting the parameters around what it needs to be and what it needs to do for you and the lifestyle that you want to lead. But for me personally, as a serial innovator, I love the idea of being able to experiment and do different things and learning and adjusting and accordingly. And so for me, it's been a beautiful experiment to continue to think through what does business ownership look like for me. And I think that's the fun. And if you're doing this, you're an entrepreneur. Embrace that. It's actually, and it's scary, yes, but also really fun to be able to take control of your own destiny in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. As we wrap up, Claire, is there anything we haven't touched on today that you wanted to share with your fellow independent consultants?
I don't think I'd mentioned this, but it's something that I believe your network is everything, and I think maintaining connections, resparking connections. It's just it in this type of work, I think it not only opens so much up for you, but I think it allows you to get fresh thinking and sort of approach your business with just different types of insights that are coming at you. And so I think to the extent where that becomes part, just a core part of your business practice where you're nurturing that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be because you're trying to land your next gig. Sometimes that's not really what it should be about. It's literally just taking the joyful thing about all of this is that this is such a people business. And so to be able to rekindle and spark those connections, I think is both crucial, but also probably one of the biggest benefits in this type of work.
Yeah, one of the things you shared a little bit ago was this idea of, it sounds like, maintaining that networking process that you've got going and then also augmenting it with, the mid funnel that you talked about, maybe a little bit more scalable way to keep in touch with people and continue to add value. Will you tell us a little bit about what that will look like for you?
Yeah.
What is looking like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and what I'd also share too is the marketing piece of it. It does have to feel authentic to you and sort of what you want to do. I think you and I have talked about, Melissa. I'm like, I'm not a like social like lover. I'm not a like I'm active on LinkedIn, but it's not always my favorite task either. And so trying to figure out what feels most authentic to you in terms of continuing to cultivate and put yourself out there. For me, it is I value writing. I really enjoy writing. I enjoy speaking. Those are the areas that I'm leaning into. I'm experimenting with email. I'm going to start to play around with that a bit as well, having seen some really interesting examples of newsletters and emails and tips and things like that out there. But it kind of follows the same approach. I mean, really, marketing follows your strategy. Who are you serving? What's the value proposition in your story? And what are the tactics that, best fit both of those? And what's the best means for you to tell your story in a way that feels super authentic? And so I think that is very much of that sort of mid funnel work that, again, I'm trying to not make it feel like it's a chore.
Yeah.
It's something, and I think leaning into it in a way that I think where you can actually feel like you're getting some joy out of it as well will make it, just something that it becomes a habit for you.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I love writing to when it feels like a chore every Friday or most Fridays that I send an email. I love just thinking of one person that I'm writing to. And the crazy thing is sometimes that person will write me back, even though I didn't, it doesn't say Dear Claire, right? I mean, well, the email system actually does put their name in it. But the point is it's just such a fun experiment to see is if you can write to one person that might really resonate with them or be something that helps them zoom out in some way or think about something in a slightly different way, and then for that person to reply is such a fun experiment.
Gratifying, and I think and it's the back and forth that actually makes the communication so rich. I think you don't want to blast something out to the and just have it go, but I think it is the what could potentially come back is really interesting. And even if nothing does come back, just knowing that there's probably something that you've sparked in somebody's brain. And I think that's the piece that I get a lot of joy in, and specific to writing in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you bring up such an important piece here too, which is always choosing the strategy that's the intersection of what you think will resonate most with your ideal clients and what you want to be doing. There's lots of strategies out there. No reason to torture yourself posting on LinkedIn, 3 times a day. If it's something you don't want to be
Yeah,
doing.
and some people
Yeah.
are great, and people that
Yes.
lights them up in a very different way. And so I think maybe that's the other piece of this, that I would say from, a realization. I mean, independent consulting, it's such a personal journey. What you do will look different than what other people do. You may be in similar spaces or different, similar subject areas, but your approach is maybe completely different. And that's good. And
Yeah.
I think that there's work that you do that will resonate with your customers and your audience that makes sense. And those are the relationships that you'll continue to cultivate.
Thank you so much for being here, Claire. You're so generous with your time and your insights. Is there anything else you want to share if people want to find you or and reach out, or maybe some peer groups?
Oh
Tell
gosh,
us a
yeah.
little bit about
I'm
that.
always super excited to meet other independents. So LinkedIn is always a good spot, despite my not avidly posting. I do on it. I am definitely lurking. Claire at claireelvers.com, or on my website, claireelvers.com.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll put all of those links in the show notes. And thank you again. Thank you for finding me from this podcast and for the work we've done together and for coming on and sharing your experiences with the retreat and growing your business. So excited to see what's to come in this next year as you're growing even
Oh
further.
gosh, I appreciate. Well, and I appreciate. It goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Just the work that you do, Melissa, is so valuable and so helpful, for those, anyone, regardless of consulting life stage that you may actually be in. It's been a lifeline for me personally in a lot of ways, not even in the direct work that we've had together. And so I can't thank you enough for the work that you do as well.
Well, thank you, Claire. That means everything to me. So I appreciate it. We'll talk with you soon.
Sounds good. Bye.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melisaliberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.